Hello and welcome, everybody. This is Tony. We appreciate everybody who's joining us tonight. As always, it seems to be kind of part of our our nightmare, if you want to say, is we are having some technical difficulty getting our presenter on. However, don't worry, if we can't get him on, he's going to just drive over here to my office. But first, we want to make sure that everybody can hear me okay. Please let me know that you can hear me. Type in yes in the chat box. And go ahead, type in yes. Let's see. Okay, we're getting some response here. Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. Today, Torrey Harmon will be answering your questions about addiction recovery. This can be about any addiction. However, we do specialize in pornography addiction. And so if you have a question that is outside the pornography addiction, we are still more than willing to answer it. We have several questions that are already in the queue. Actually, we have quite a few that are in the queue. However, we do give precedence to those who are live on the call. So feel free to go ahead and send in your questions. You can email them to us through the chat box, and we will put your questions first. And we don't generally sell on these webinars. These are a Q&A webinar where we answer your questions. However, we frequently get questions asked about our addiction recovery system that we have put together. Thank you again so much for joining us, and we're going to go ahead and start with the questions that I can answer, but soon our therapist will be joining us. Okay, the first question that we're going to answer for me says, well, it's all dealing with the addiction program. So what our addiction treatment system is it's an opportunity for you to get 24/7 help in the sense of being able to watch videos and also take part in a private email group and a system that is there for you. A lot of times we have people who are struggling with addiction that they just simply don't have the time or the means to be able to meet with a therapist like they need to, but yet the triggers come nonetheless. They start coming in the morning and sometimes don't stop till the evening. And this system is there for you 24/7 so that you can get the support. We have had several people on it that say it's absolutely fantastic. And however, there is a question that's in the queue that is going to be talking more about, how to identify what program is going to be best or what system is going to be best for you. It looks like we're still having problems with Torrey jumping on, so I think we're going to have him come over here. Give me just 1 second. I'm going to call him. So you get to listen live as I make this call. Go ahead and start sending in your questions. Like I said, we are going to be just a few minutes as it takes a few minutes to get over here. But start sending your questions. We'll put those at the top of the list so that we make sure you get precedence. We are so grateful for you to be here, and I apologize that we are having these problems, but I guess it seems to be kind of nature with technology. Okay, 1 second. I'm going to talk to Torrey here really quick. Hey, if you're not getting audio, why don't you shoot on over here and we'll just do it live in my office. Okay, bye. Okay, he's on his way, so we will see him shortly. That's frustrating, but hey, nonetheless, we're here for you. Okay, just give us 1 more second. I'm going to get things a little bit more prepared, and we'll be right back with you. looks like we've got some old faithfuls here. Okay. I love it when technology works, and it's very extremely frustrating when it does not. However, we do have a lot of questions that I'm hoping Torrey gets here quickly so that we can get these answered for you. The other thing I wanted to make note about is, for those who are not aware, Gordon, who is the founder of Integral, has now moved on to become a clinical director for a women's sexual abuse center, abuse center. And he will no longer be doing these, but maybe every once in a while we can get him on as a featured guest. And therefore, as yes, we've become an authorized Integral provider, and I've been with Integral since 2000 and set up the online addiction treatment system and worked with Gordon and everything in building that up. So you'll have the same great customer service that we can provide, and we are here to help you in absolutely any way possible. And if you are a member of the treatment system, we encourage you to reach out to us and let us know how we can improve it. We are always here for you. We've got a lot of things in the queue, but we want to make sure that it's what you are needing. Torrey's never been over here to my office, so I just need to make sure he gets here safely. But another question I'm going to go ahead and ask, it says, how can I educate my therapist? And we'll ask this question to Torrey as well, see what his thoughts are on this. But it's so important to understand that not all therapists can and will treat pornography addiction. It is kind of a unique addiction, and it's that the way it alters the brain, and since it's not a physical substance, you're kind of dealing with teaching people a level of security with using technology without it controlling their lives. We do not support getting rid of technology. Technology is all the way around us, and we need it. We just need to learn to have the tools that are necessary so that we can do that. So how to educate your therapist, if you're really not wanting to try another therapist that specializes in pornography addiction or sexual addiction, then I'd encourage you to go to our YouTube channel, which is Porn Stinks. That's youtube.com/Porn Stinks. And you can go there, watch a lot of videos that we have that will help to educate people on the brain, help them to understand from a pornography addiction standpoint what they can do. And it will also provide them the tools that they need to, so that we don't have stuff like this happen where, you're just so frustrated that you just can't function. And it's our goal, our hope, our focus is to empower you so that you can make the changes that you need to, and you can utilize technology without the constant fear of the triggers that come. Let's see. Let me see if there's another question I can go ahead and answer. Okay, here's another one. What can I do if I relapse or am in danger of relapse? Again, this is the relapse happens frequently for a lot of people. It's something that is a constant trigger, because experiencing pornography, we describe it as 1 time is too many and 1,000 times is never enough. No matter how much you look at porn, it's never going to fill that need that you're looking for. And so what can you do when you relapse? You can go to, again, that website that I just told you about, our YouTube channel, and be able to sign up. Oh, 1 second. Looks like Torrey's here. Woohoo! He is here. Come on in, Torrey. but you'll be able to sign up there and be educated on what the brain is doing, and then you'll be able to engage with it. You'll be able to engage your prefrontal cortex because it walks you through the process. But we've got Torrey here, and I'm going to go ahead and start letting him answer the questions instead of me. But Torrey, go ahead and introduce yourself and say hi to the folks.
Hi there, everybody. Thanks for bearing with us as we deal with these technical difficulties today. For some reason, we had a problem with some audio, and thanks, Tony, for helping to keep things moving here for just a minute. But we're here now. We're ready to roll, and excited to go through all these questions. I appreciate everybody participating. We're excited to be here.
Oh, okay. The first question we've got is, how long does it usually take for the limbic system and the prefrontal cortex to switch roles when one abstains from pornography and masturbation?
That's a very good question. And the easy, quick answer to that is that it really varies by individual quite a bit. Certainly, we kind of typically like to say that because every individual is different, we are going to have some different time frames, but what we typically see is that individuals are experiencing the sort of the shift in the ability to look at things from a cognitive prefrontal cortex kind of view over several months. That's kind of the time frame that we typically see. So again, that varies quite a bit depending on how much of a commitment there is to the change process and the frequency of help that's received in therapy, for example, how much work is put into it. But I would say that generally this takes probably, to see significant changes, it probably takes at least about 6 months.
Okay, well, how do pornography and separately masturbation change the brain?
Okay, so if you kind of treat them differently as separate things, I'll start with pornography. Pornography changes the brain by changing the neural pathways that lead to decision making. And so basically you start to have a situation where the brain starts to interpret limbic responses in a way that changes how the brain functions. It will take input from the limbic system, and it will interpret that from a sexual standpoint as a survival aspect. So quite literally, if the instinctual part of the brain is starting to take over and send the instructions to the cognitive part of the brain that says, I need this to survive, I need this to get by, then it's going to literally change those connections, those pathways that happen, to the point where your brain is no longer able to cognitively think about something as a non-survival technique, but rather it's a survival technique. So it's changing the connections in your brain. We call the term neuroplasticity, where the brain changes over time, either for good or for bad. It can certainly be healing and improve over time as well. But the way that pornography specifically affects the brain, in summary, is that it will change the pathways in your brain so that you're relying on those connections that send the sexual impulses as a survival technique that overwhelms the brain, and it basically tells your cognitive part of your brain to shut down, and it's no longer functioning to help you make those decisions. It's completely limbic, and because it's a limbic part of the brain that's taking over, your decision-making power, at least your perception of that, is essentially gone. So that it changes the brain dramatically in terms of your decision-making power, and it literally forms the pathways, the neural pathways, in such a way that what once was a very underdeveloped road or pathway is now a freeway, and it's really chugging along fast. Lots of information is being passed on through that limbic system to the cognitive part of the brain, and it's taking over. So that's the first answer there for pornography. The second one, regarding masturbation, it's very similar, but I think I would just say that it brings in just a bit more of the physical aspects of the limbic experience because of the the physical manifestation of the behavior. It's not just a visual thing. Pornography, of course, brings with it heavily visual things, but also emotional and physiological changes. But where masturbation is something that's actually physical action that's going on, that you're carrying out, it kind of is that much more reinforcing to the brain because of that physical component, that activity that you're bringing out. And so it's going to do the same things in your brain, but it's going to have perhaps even more powerful connotation with the physical. And so the impact essentially is that you'll have the same kind of addictive behavior, the same kind of impulsive pathways that are being formed and reinforced over and over. And as a result, you're going to see a lot of very powerful draw to return to that behavior. Even imagining it at that point can become something that's very real and physical that you experience. And it really reinforces very powerfully that impulse to go back to. So it's a big challenge. It definitely changes the brain, and the kind of the emotional and physical aspects of that go along with it are very powerful too.
The important thing is realize that neuroplasticity is real, that your brain can change, and that's exactly what Torrey was talking about. How do I cope with porn flashbacks?
This is a really great question, because a lot of people, as they go through recovery and they start to be able to manage that behavior effectively, they really experience some very tough imagery. And research has actually gone into a lot of study in the recent decade or so regarding how imagery affects the brain. And a lot of research has gone into kind of distinguishing between the short-term memory that you look at an image and you are able to remember that image for a little while. You're able to apply memory. Let's say you look at an image of a horse, for example, and away from the horse, so you can remember what that looks like fairly well for a little while. That eventually goes away. In fact, the time it takes for a memory of an image to start to deteriorate is literally milliseconds. So while you might start with a very strong image recall ability in the short-term memory, it'll go away pretty fast. Now, when you add to memory emotion and all elements of the limbic system being very, very instinctive, all those elements together, it starts to embed itself in the long-term memory by the flashbacks, as the person who asked them referred to them as flashbacks, can happen because they are embedded in the long-term memory. So it's a very different kind of experience. It doesn't just go away because it's deeply embedded with emotions as well. You might compare that to someone who goes through post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, for example, a car accident, or witnessing someone being injured or killed or something like that, where it's a very dramatic emotional scene. It's deeply embedded in your memory, and because of that emotion that's tied to it, it's very easily recalled. In fact, it can be recalled involuntarily. And so one of the things that we talk about with being able to deal with involuntary imagery is a technique that is becoming more popular all the time, which is called mindfulness. It's a form of meditation, very related to that. But mindfulness is the ability to focus on the now, the physical experience of the now. So it basically helps you to become very aware of your physical experience right in this moment, instead of being caught in thoughts and images from the past, or things that are very intangible, things that are very memory based. Instead of doing that, you can go to the present very heavily. And when you go to the present, that means that you're focusing on, quite literally, your physical experience, like the sounds you're hearing and your breathing and the tenseness or the relaxation state of your muscles and things like that. to the point where you're able to focus a lot more on the here and now. By focusing on the here and now, you can change exactly what your mind is focusing on. You can really bring your mind back to the physical and the present moment. And when you do have thoughts that are unwanted, you can develop the ability to gently push those away, to gently relax and not focus on those things, and be able to key in on what you want to focus on, which is right now. By practicing mindfulness, which there are various ways to do that. Again, it's like meditation, but by practicing some of those techniques, you're able to gain a lot stronger ability to take charge of the brain, to be very cognitive in what you're doing in the moment. And that is very helpful. Last thought on that question is that, I like to ask people this question. If I say to you, don't think of a polka dot elephant, obviously your thoughts go to the thing that I just mentioned. So it's not very helpful to just say, don't think about that. And in fact, that can become very frustrating to someone who's trying to recover from flashbacks or related, memory type issues. It's frustrating because they feel like, well, I try not to, but it's still there. I can't just push it away. And that's very true. If you're trying to push it away, you're focused on it. And because you're focused on it, it doesn't go away. So if we are able to bring our minds to the present, be very mindful of the physical experience in the now, then that's something that can really be helpful with flashbacks and those kinds of imagery problems.
Okay, this question is regarding the one that we just talked about. How does pornography and separately masturbation change the brain? He wants to know if we have any videos which discuss this change. I'm not quite sure if that's just the two-part brain or if that's something else.
Okay, so videos that show how the addictive behavior affects the brain. So we have some videos where we discuss this kind of thing on our website that you can check out for sure, and it's very helpful. We also have some printed content in our treatment manuals that we use that refer to the two-part brain and how it can impact you. There are a lot of resources available on the web these days as well that show how the limbic system works and how the prefrontal cortex works. So you could always do some searches online to find out some of those things. Tony's showing some images right now of the locations in the brain where these things are taking place. So I guess I'd recommend you start with our website and that you check out the materials, the videos we have available there. We also have these treatment manuals that are available. Whether or not you actually come in to see us for therapy, you could purchase a treatment manual and see a lot of this content as well. We also do, like I said, we do these webinars, and we do other kinds of presentations where we talk about this brain activity. So there's various resources available that you can use to get a better understanding of how this all works.
Okay, I'm going to post the link in the chat box that after this is over, you'll be able to go to our website and be able to, our YouTube channel, to be able to see the different videos we have. And we are constantly posting more and more videos. So I just posted that live in the box. Again, for those who are not here, it's youtube.com/porn stinks. Okay, are there any other ways to meditate other than how is taught in the manual?
Okay. Essentially, one of the things that I recommend the most for meditation or for mindfulness exercises is to take advantage of a guided mindfulness experience. There are several resources available that you can access anytime on the web. A lot of times you can search YouTube for guided mindfulness exercise or something similar and find a lot of really helpful guided exercises where someone is walking you through that vocally to help you to do that. And there's a lot of different variations on that. For example, things that you can do on your own might include imagining your favorite scene. Maybe it's a favorite vacation spot, such as a beach or a resort or a favorite place that you travel with your family or something like that. You can imagine that, and then you can start to imagine your experience there, draw on memories of being there, draw on the emotions and even the smells and the sounds that you experience while you're there. Those can be very not only relaxing, but also very impactful in terms of your ability to meditate, because it can really bring in some sharp focus on your now experience. And so I think that's another suggestion for being able to meditate. A lot of people bring in some religious aspects too. If you're a religious person and you like to think of a higher power, that's another thing that you can do, is to start to be very intentional with communication with a higher power. Prayer is another term for that people refer to that as. So that's definitely another aspect that you can turn to. A lot of people have found a lot of success with being able to refer to their faith, their higher power, and having a sort of a communion kind of experience that can be a great, powerful form of meditation as well.
Okay, I answered this question a little bit earlier, but maybe you'll have a different twist on it. And that is, how can I educate my therapist?
Yeah, Tony and I, we've talked about this a little bit before, and it's a great question, because honestly, there's a lot of therapists out there who don't focus on this kind of work and are less experienced in it. And it is quite a specialty area, I would say. Because even though it shares a lot of the traits of some other mental health concerns or addictions, even there are some unique aspects to it that are very important. So probably my first suggestion, if you have a therapist who is not familiar with working with someone with a sexual addiction, and particularly with pornography, my first suggestion would be to have the therapist visit our website and start to become familiar with what we talk about. Go through the videos and start to experience some of the learning process. Another thing that can be done is to have your therapist get a copy of our treatment manual that you go through as a client. You don't have to go through the therapy with us to be able to take advantage of the manual. It's a very effective, very well-written workbook that allows you to think a lot through the experiences of what the brain is going through, the triggers, the addictive voice, all elements of healing from pornography addiction and related addictions. And so a lot of specific insights can be achieved through that. So I think that would be another helpful thing. We're also always willing to consult with other therapists. We have a very much an abundance mentality, if you will, where we feel like it's important to share what helps people. And we want to share that because we want to be able to help individuals get the help that they need, regardless of where they live, regardless of the money they have, regardless of how severe the addiction is, regardless of all those variables. We want to be able to help people in some way. And so we're very open to consultation with a therapist to be able to give them some helpful hints and suggestions on what to do to help you individually. And probably the last thing I would suggest on that is that you as a client of that therapist, being able to share with them exactly what your experience is in that particular kind of addiction will help them to understand what you're going through a lot more. I think it's important to know that a therapist doesn't have to go through the same kind of experience to be able to understand what you're going through necessarily. Now, there's definitely value in somebody being able to say, yeah, I've gone through that firsthand and I understand what it is. But aside from that, most therapists have some understanding of addictive behavior as a whole and what it takes to recover from that in general. And that can be a help. That can be a great starting point. But I think anything you can do to help that therapist understand things that are unique to pornography addiction that you experience that they may not have heard about before, give them those insights and help them understand what you're experiencing and be very open about that so that they can try to help you the best they can. I definitely would recommend that we can talk and consult with your therapist, and that would be very helpful too.
So let me just restate that. We will actually talk with their therapist to essentially kind of train them in this. All right.
Yep.
That's awesome. I just really want to restate that because a lot of people, a lot of therapists, it's like, oh, no, it's my client. Don't you I'm not going to share my secrets or anything like that. It's not about us. It's not about your therapist. It's about you getting the healing that you need. That's what it's all about.
That's right.
Okay, next question is why am I feeling so sad about giving up porn? And must I delete all my porn?
Oh, I really appreciate that question too. These are all great. So it's interesting that a feeling of sadness can come into the equation when someone is trying to recover from an addictive behavior. A lot of people would say, well, if it's something that is so disruptive in my life and is so negative in my life, why would I be sad to take it out of my life? And so one of the quick answers to that is that it is a, if you think of it as a sort of long-term coping companion, if you will, it's sometimes hard to say, I'm going to go ahead and live life without you. Because like many forms of addictive behavior, it can be considered a form of self-medication. It's a way to cope. It's a way to handle stress or boredom or loneliness or being overwhelmed, being frustrated. All those kinds of emotions can be mitigated in the short term with this kind of an addictive behavior, an acting out experience. Now, obviously, it can satisfy those things only temporarily, and it's only something that is very superficial in the way that it can satisfy those things. It's really a numbing mechanism. It doesn't really take away those challenges. It doesn't really replace them. It numbs you from the experience. And so it's very much self-medication, much like taking medication for a headache. If you have a headache, you take medicine, you feel better, typically. And that's something that if you said, well, I'm taking away all medication, suddenly it's like, I've got to figure out a different way to deal with a headache. So in a similar way, it's kind of hard to take away a coping mechanism like pornography addiction. And so there can be some sadness, there can be some difficulty with that, not because it's something that you long for and want in your life permanently, but because it kind of leaves you wanting something to help you along the way. So it's an absence of something that you've been able to lean on to feel numb. So there, a lot of clients have stated, I know a lot of clients that I've worked with have said that they do often feel a sense of sadness, but a lot of that will be a temporary phase as you continue to progress through the different stages of change. And I'll mention briefly what those stages of change are, because that may also be helpful information for people who are listening. The first stage is pre-contemplation. You're considering a situation in your life. You don't see a problem and you don't anticipate making any changes. So that's the first stage. No problem, no changes. The second stage is contemplation. I see a problem, but I don't want to make any changes. So see a problem, but no changes still. The third stage is then preparation. Preparation is I see a problem and I want to make a change. So your attitude has shifted. The fourth stage is then activity or an active change process. You enter into that process, that stage of change. You are wanting to change, you are implementing change, and you are working actively at that constantly. And then the final change is the maintenance stage, where you maintain the behaviors of your current life experience. You're able to manage the addiction effectively. You're able to see triggers effectively and navigate around them well. And that's the maintenance stage. So a lot of times going through the both the preparation and the action stages are those times when you will feel like there's a sense of loss, a sense of sadness as you go through that stage of change. But that will be something that is also recovered from, because you'll find that there are other things in life that you can do to cope and that don't necessarily numb you. They actually are healthy coping mechanisms, and you can find that you're glad that the numbing portion, that addictive behavior is now out of your life, and you can move on. It is kind of a grieving process in some ways because you're going away from something that you've leaned on so much.
What can I do if I relapse? Or am I in danger if I relapse?
What can you do if you relapse? And are you in danger if you relapse? Well, one important fundamental principle of recovery is that relapse is part of recovery. Now, there's a fine line there between accepting relapse for what it is as a step in recovery and justifying addictive behavior. That fine line is something that will be better understood through the process as you go through it. So, it depends on what the behavior is as to whether or not it's actually dangerous to you. For example, if it's a substance abuse type of thing, and you go into a very serious relapse, certainly that can be dangerous. If you turn to alcohol or drugs and you potentially overdose or something, that can be very dangerous, definitely. In terms of pornography addiction specifically, it can be dangerous. Not necessarily in the same sense. It's not necessarily an immediate physical threat to your safety as much as it is an emotional threat. It can be an emotional threat where you may go into a state of mind that is very negative, very hopeless, very detrimental, even suicidal at times. There are individuals who experience suicidal thoughts and desires when they experience very significant relapse. And that can be obviously very dangerous. So I think it's important to understand that relapse is part of recovery when you view it as a step forward instead of justifying it as a way to continue the addiction. If you view it as a step forward, knowing that you are going through a long-term change process, knowing that it does take time and that your brain has to take months and even years to be able to adapt to a new way of processing stimulus and processing triggers, you can see it as an actual positive step, not because you've acted out again as a relapse, but because you can see that you're able to understand what it is better, and you're able to implement and practice the steps of picking yourself up afterwards and moving forward. We would suggest that you have a strong network around you of not only a therapeutic network, but also individuals who are in your circle of trust who you can turn to in a time of need, who can help you to get through the more difficult moments, whether it's relapse or whether it's just the threat of relapse. Someone that you can turn to openly and say, I'm challenged right now. I'm having a tough moment. Can you just be with me? Can you talk to me? Can you help me through this? That can be very helpful. But I understand that relapse can be serious. It can be detrimental if you allow it to kind of drag you into a mode of hopelessness and not see it as a step forward. But certainly we can use that to pick ourselves up and move on. It can help us to have awareness of where we currently are in the change process as well. That awareness is very helpful because it can help us to see that, okay, while I'm not completely in abstinence yet from this addiction, I'm not totally sober, if you will, but I am getting closer all the time. I'm making strides, and that's meaningful to me. So I would look at it that way. If you do feel like there is an emotional threat to relapse in pornography addiction, then I would strongly suggest you talk to a therapist, or that you keep in mind some of the typical safety net type opportunities, such as a suicide hotline, a network around you of people who you trust who can help you in those moments.
We get this question frequently, and I think a lot of people have kind of trained themselves in this. It says, I need porn to calm me down so I can sleep. What else can I do?
Yeah, this is a very common scenario. A lot of people go through such a busy life experience every day that it's difficult to wind down. It's difficult to relax, to let your brain go to a relaxed state and go to sleep eventually. The thing that I mentioned earlier about mindfulness can be a very helpful thing for you as you try to relax and get yourself ready for sleep. Meditation, slight variation of mindfulness, but that can be something that's also very helpful. So definitely, I would suggest that you find that one suggestion is to find a specific form of mindfulness exercise that is helpful to you to be able to focus on the here and now, the physical experience. It can be extremely relaxing. It can be extremely helpful in allowing you to focus your thoughts on what you want to focus them on. And that a lot of times is enough to help people to relax enough to go to sleep. Because if you think about what you're doing when you are turning to pornography as a way to, kind of prepare yourself for sleep, you're looking for a release. You're looking for an emotional release to the day, essentially. You're looking for a way to just have kind of an emotional climax to the day. And then once that emotional stimulus happens, naturally the brain is going to say, okay, there it is. There's my coping mechanism. I appreciate that emotional stimulus. I'm feeling good again. This pressure and the stress of the day is now secondary or completely gone from my mind, and now I can relax. Well, instead of doing that, instead of turning to that same activity, we would suggest that you could very much focus on the things that are in the now, and that will help you to relax quite a bit. Another thing that can help is to turn to writing. Writing out your experiences of the day can be very powerful. There is a lot of scientific evidence that shows that if you write out thoughts and experiences of the day, that you're able to process those in your brain. You're able to derive meaning from what you've experienced through that day. You're able to define what it means for you. If there's a problem that's pressing on your mind and that's making it difficult to sleep, writing it down can help you to possibly work through that problem. But also the fact that it just physically captures what that problem is a way to then kind of give yourself permission. Your brain then has permission to just say, all right, it's been captured. I've got the gist of what I'm working on mentally written down. And because it's written down, I'm good. I can easily let that be for now. I can allow myself to relax because I've captured, I've defined, I've recorded what it is that I'm working on in my mind. And by doing that, it'll be there for me tomorrow. I can turn to it tomorrow. I won't forget it, and I'll be able to move on. Now, sometimes those things will still fester, if you will, or they'll continue. They'll hang around in the subconscious part of the brain. When you're sleeping, sometimes people will say, I went to sleep and I had a problem on my mind, and I couldn't get out of my mind. I finally fell asleep, but then during my sleep, I actually came up with a solution, because your brain is an amazing tool and it can do amazing things. Sometimes it needs to be able to relax and recover from the day in order to be able to find solutions and think through things more effectively. That's why a lot of times you'll say, let's sleep on it. That's a phrase that we often use. Let's sleep on it. Let's think about it. We'll consider it. And even if you're not actively considering something in a very intentional way, the subconscious can work on it. And then when you get up the next day, often you can find a great solution. So there's a couple of suggestions: the mindfulness, the writing. I think one more suggestion that I would give you is to be able to share something with another person. If you have a spouse or a significant other in your home, someone you're close to, a close friend, someone that you can just sort of download information with, form a partnership where you say, hey, I need to just be able to download things to you, get it out in the open, process it together, and then all of a sudden you feel like, okay, I feel some relief and I can move on. Those are a few suggestions for you for being able to get to sleep at night.
I want to just confirm and testify about the power of that writing. I've seen so many people who are suicidal, people who have suffered from anxiety, who have gone through abuse, who have gone through different trauma. The power of writing is phenomenal. And the more you write down, the more you can kind of just get off your chest. It's amazing how it just takes over. And that's why it's so important with the exercises that we've given in the treatment system. It's writing down those thoughts and then being able to get rid of it. The act of being able to just kind of wad it up and throw it away if you want to, or just tuck it away, just like I don't have to worry about it anymore. I mean, it's powerful. So I strongly recommend that. My son can't stop looking at porn. Should I send him to a wilderness survival program?
Oh, that's great. Obviously that's a parent who has a lot of concern and a lot of interest in helping their son. So there's a few things that you'd probably want to consider when you think about that opportunity. Wilderness experiences can certainly take place and have a lot of impact on particularly young people. They can really benefit from that if that's needed. Now, they're not necessarily cheap, and they're not necessarily something that's always available to everybody, and so it's not always an option that you'd want to turn to. It depends on the situation. I think what I would consider would be how significant are my son's needs? Is it something where my son really needs daily assistance to be able to even manage life, to be able to get through the daily challenges of life? Or is it something that, on a weekly basis or a monthly basis, a little direction, a little guidance, a little therapy can help to continue to make progress that way? We kind of look at probably roughly three levels of care. One of those is what we most often do, which is the outpatient periodic therapy sessions, where we would meet weekly or several times a month and carry out a therapeutic experience that way. The majority of people are able to get the help they need with that level of treatment. But the next level up would be something like a more intensive outpatient kind of thing, where you have probably touch points multiple times a week, perhaps daily, with somebody in a therapeutic network system. So that could be with therapists, or it could be with someone in sort of a mentor kind of role. It could be other people in a leadership role in that person's life, such as a teacher, a church religious leader of some kind. Those kinds of relationships can help and be very supportive as well, and in that more intensive level of treatment on an outpatient basis. And then the third level would be a wilderness type of experience, or a residential kind of experience, very similar types of things. Definitely, if the situation is such that the young person is unable to care for their own needs, they're doing activities so frequently that they cannot function, it's very disruptive to daily life. That's when you would probably definitely consider a wilderness kind of experience or a residential kind of treatment. Depending on what's available and depending on the cost, that can be somewhat prohibitive, but that would be something to consider.
Torrey, I know we just started our network therapy program. Why don't we talk a little bit about that for those who live within Utah that could take advantage of that?
Yeah, it's a very great offering, I think, for a certain set of clients who have a need for what I was just talking about. They have a need for very regular touch points with people who can help them. They need regular daily or at least multiple week touch points with somebody to be able to help them through their day. So the network therapy that we do is essentially we have a set of individuals assigned to help a person. We have the family who is set up to help that person and support them most directly. But then we also have the therapists and the mentors around them who can also significantly help. And we'll do a combination of care and treatment in our office, as well as in the homes of the individuals. Sometimes that's with just the individual. Sometimes that's with the entire family. Sometimes that's with part of the family. It might involve school teachers. It might involve individuals from the court system if the courts are involved in someone's situation. It might involve, as I said before, religious leaders, parents and friends. And it's a whole network of people who are set up and very strategically coordinated so that they can help that individual every day if needed. So sometimes substance abuse is a part of that. It's often the case with someone who needs something like a network therapy experience, where we can intervene and have intervention experiences very frequently. Drug testing can be included in that. There's a lot of different things that are done to be able to support those individuals every day if needed. And so that's our network therapy experience. It's a really great way to help somebody who has a need for major intervention so that their lives are not so disrupted.
The next question follows right along is that what's the difference between our network therapy program and a wilderness survival plan?
Yeah, so it depends on the wilderness survival program. They're all a little bit different, but typically the wilderness experience is something where you go away for a certain period of time, and you are assigned a group, and you have a leader, and perhaps a few therapists are involved in that group as well, and you go have some wilderness experiences, camping or obstacle courses or challenges, whatever it is, river rafting, all those kinds of things can be a part of that. So it's beneficial because it can create interest, especially for a young person. It can be something that it brings some activities that they enjoy doing, but it's done in a way that they can benefit by the association with people who are helpful in their lives. So they're people who are uplifting, who are empowering, who are teaching them how to be making better decisions in their lives. And it's very much an outdoor, away from home kind of experience. It doesn't have to be outdoor always. It could be a residential experience too if it's designed to be that way. But that's one of the key differences, is that it's an out of home, out of your comfort zone kind of experience, as compared to something where you're living at home and you receive treatment either there or in an office.
One of the powers of the in-home network therapy that we do is frequently the family system is part of the problem, and the child or the young adult does not know how to function within that family system. And by doing this, we help teach the whole family how to connect, love, and support one another, and improve the family system so that it's actually functioning properly. Because even after they come home, if the family system is part of the problem and they go to a wilderness residential facility and then they come back, the problem's still there that was causing the problem in the first place. So with this, it helps give that education, that treatment process to the whole family. And we've seen some tremendous success already. Okay, let's go on to the next question. Holy cow, we are wrapping close to time. We'll take a few more questions here because we were delayed on our technology glitches, but I know Torrey's got another counseling session right after this, so we're only going to take a couple more questions here. What are some tips for preparing a safe and positive environment for recovery?
Tips for preparing a safe and positive environment for recovery. The first thing that I think about for creating a safe environment for recovery is to create the relationships that foster recovery. So Tony was just talking about how we do a lot of work with family systems, especially in the network therapy approach that we use. And I would say that one of the very important aspects of the environment for recovery is creating a sort of judgment-free environment. There's a lot of inherent shame that comes with addictive behavior. This particular kind of addiction is also it can be very shameful, because people often say, well, it shouldn't be something that affects my life so much. It shouldn't be so problematic. Sexuality is a natural part of who we are as human beings. So why should it be so problematic? So it can be that kind of addiction can be particularly shameful when it feels like it's disruptive and out of control in your life. So to me, the first step toward creating a positive environment for recovery is to get all those who are going to be involved in that recovery process, such as in a family or in a close set of friends or whatever tight relationships exist, to be able to say, we can be open about this. We can talk about this in a non-shaming kind of way, in a very loving and accepting kind of way. The more openness there is, the better the chance for recovery. So therefore, if we reduce the aspects of shame, we increase the openness, and that will allow for a lot more of a recovery process. Another thing would be that Um, and this is probably something that applies particularly to parents of young people who are working on pornography addiction recovery, but it can apply to anyone. And that is that it's not about implementing tools to completely enforce abstinence. That brings more shame, and that typically brings more frustration than anything. Now, we don't necessarily want to condone, free reign to the internet, and have no limitations whatsoever. But we would suggest that you have agreed upon accountability kinds of tools. So you can have some, web filtering. You can have accountability discussions about how the internet's being used. You can have agreed upon rules and guidelines within your home. Those things can all be helpful. But I think it's important to know that an addict is going to find a way to access this kind of material if they're bound and determined to do so. So if they're going to seek it, no matter what happens, because of a very powerful trigger, they're going to find it, and we need to be able to say, that's going to happen. It's a real possibility. But then, as we are able to understand that the aspect of accountability is very empowering, we can turn to accountability more, and we can say, okay, yep, I used the content again, I used that material again, and talk about it openly, not in a shaming way, but in a helpful and empowering way, meaning that we understand each other and we seek to help everyone on board to be able to process that together in a helpful and loving way. That can help that that environment to be a lot better and more effective for recovery. So there's a few tips for you. There's a lot of things that we can talk about, but those are a few.
Okay, I think this will be the last question because we are at the top of the hour, and I do know that Torrey's got another appointment. So the last question we're going to take is, actually, I'm going to skip that question. We can go down to simply, what is mental illness?
Oh, that's a great question. A very broad question. I think a lot of people have struggled to identify and define exactly what mental illness is. I think perhaps the simplest way to think about mental illness is something that affects your mental health in a negative way. So whether that is a disorder of the brain, something that is developmentally impactful on the brain, such as a learning disorder, or whether that is an emotional kind of thing, or whether that is an addictive behavior, which can incorporate various elements of those things, such as emotion and behavior altogether. All of those things can be captured within the general category of mental illness. And so essentially, we like to consider mental illness, the definition of that is something that an individual experiences that is detrimental to their life experience in their mental or emotional processing, especially. So it's a very broad thing to try to define. I think there are individuals who would say, well, addiction is not a mental illness; it's a behavioral problem or something like that. We would consider addiction to be a mental illness because it does change the brain and it significantly impacts the life of the person. So hopefully that answers the question about what is mental illness. I would suggest that you also read some definitions that professionals in the mental health industry have put together in the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. Some good definitions there. In short, it's called the DSM. You might read in that or look at some psychology websites for more definitions. But that's something that you can look at there is the definition of generally something that impacts your life that from a mental standpoint, mental and emotional.
Well, Torrey, thank you very much. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. And we're going to just post a link right now that you can sign up for our next webinar, which is May 13th, and that will be Rob answering the questions. But we thank you so very much. Remember, it's not about us. It's not about your therapist or anybody else. It's about you. It's about you finding the hope, the healing, the help you need. No shame, no judgment, just healing. That's what we offer. Have a great day, and thank you so much.